This is TechTalk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. TechTalk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Welcome back to TechTalk Detroit. We're glad to have you back with us this week. Last week, we talked quite a bit about career paths for techs and kind of how to continue that career development within the technical departments. And one of the things that we touched on was one-year plans. And we had said we'd get back to that this week because there's so much that really goes into that. We didn't want to try to rush it. So that's what we're going to talk about this week. But first of all, Brian, the weather's been nice. We've had several really nice days in a row now. You know, what have you been up to? How have you been taking advantage of the nice weather?
Yeah, just been trying to stay outside as much as I can. You know, it's being cooped up in the house for the last, I don't know, 5 years it feels like, and not able to get outside. It's been nice to finally have the weather turn in our favor. So yeah, just been doing a lot of that outdoor stuff around the house. This past weekend, went up north to the lake house cabin to get the dock in the water. So exciting things.
Nice. Yeah. What lake is that on?
That's on Lake Mitchell in Cadillac.
Okay,
so,
cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's always a good time. We used to go up north every year as a kid. We went up to Little Bear Lake, and I just loved it up there. It was a great time. Yeah, I last week, you know, so I think I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, my daughter is going to be 16. So last week I drove out to Virginia from Michigan and bought her a car. So that was certainly interesting. Something that I was not looking forward to, just the thought of her being out there driving. But we got so into looking at cars and, you know, the safety features and everything that you think about when you figure you're going to have a 16-year-old daughter out there driving. And then you think, well, what if it breaks down and she's on the side of the road and, you know, all of these things. So we ended up buying a car last week. It was nice. Drove out. I rented a car, did a one-way rental, drove out there, bought the car, drove it back, all in, you know, I left Tuesday at 7 p.m. and got home Wednesday, or I guess technically Thursday at 1 o'clock in the morning. So that was fun. And then yesterday our dryer broke, so I had to go buy a new dryer yesterday. And then today our air conditioning doesn't seem to be working, but I think it just needs to be recharged. So I'm hoping to get away with not buying a new air conditioner today too. So it's been an expensive week in the Lobert household.
It's unbelievable, man. It's when it rains, it pours, you know.
Right. And especially, you know, with us having like the first week where we're in the 80s for the weather, the air conditioner's extra important. We keep our house pretty cool as it is. We usually keep it around 67, 66. So even though it's only 71 in the house right now, it feels hot.
Yeah, I know. That's. I'm actually upstairs right now in recording. There's about a 5-degree difference between the first floor and second floor. So I know what you mean, man. It's
yeah.
You know, it's hard to find that balance, but you know, that's the thing. In Michigan, you go from literally 50-degree weather to touching 90 a couple days in a row. So you just, you know, you can't win. Can't get ahead of it.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, anyways, as we mentioned, you know, we wanted to focus this week on one-year plans, and, you know, they're called one-year plans, but at the same time, we also call them leadership plans, and, you know, that can seem kind of weird when you're talking about a tech and having a, you know, quote unquote leadership plan, but you know, there's so much more that goes into it than simply, you know, training, right? That's, you know, we talked last week about training and having a training plan and all of that, and that's a piece of a complete one-year plan, but it's really just a small piece because there's so much more that goes into it. So I thought, you know, maybe we could talk through the different sections of the one-year plan that we do. And we do these every single year. Everybody in the organization, from you know, the techs to, you know, on the sales and marketing side, the leadership team, the president of the company, every single person in the company does it. And, you know, it all should kind of work together, right? It's everybody's going to have a different one-year plan, and that plan may even change throughout the year, but ultimately we have to work together to make sure that everybody's one-year plan kind of goes along with what the goals of the company are for the year as well. So, you know, it's kind of where you start is, you know, what's the, you know, company's quote unquote one-year plan, and then you kind of branch off from there. So, you know, the first section that we have is role-based objectives. And, you deal more on the technical side. I'm dealing more on the sales and marketing side. But when you think of role-based objectives, from a tech standpoint, and what they're going to focus on for the year, what are some ways that you work with the techs to be able to come up with ideas for that?
Yeah, so I think, the obvious starting point for role-based objective is going to be essentially mastering whatever their job role is. So I usually actually start with the job description and whatever their role is. And ultimately, the kind of the approach I usually take with the employees is going through the job description and literally highlighting the areas that, that we both believe that employee could use some improvement on. And then what we'll do is take those areas and kind of rope that into this plan. So, it could be as simple as, documentation skills are lacking, right? That they're not doing a great job of capturing all the data, all the changes they make, or taking good notes. It might be the ability to reach certain metrics that you expect per day. So pretty much what we'll do is we'll sit down and figure out what those are and make the main bullet point, mastering that role, that job description. And then the sub bullet points would be the areas to focus on for this period.
Yeah. So on our 1-year plans, you've got 3 columns. You got your commitments, and in the description for that, it's specific areas of focus that aligns job performance goals and objectives with the company business planning goals. So role-based objectives is one of those areas of commitments. Then you've got your execution plan, identify how you will achieve your commitments, key milestones, priorities, dependencies. And then you've got your accountabilities, define success measures and metrics to evaluate the realization of your commitment. So those are kind of the 3 columns that we fill out for each one of these. So for role-based objectives, you might have one thing, you might have 10 things, and then you got to have an execution plan on how are you going to be able to, reach those objectives. So if your objective, kind of going along what you were saying, is to document more, then you got to have steps to success on, well, what am I going to do to make sure that I document more? And then you got to be able to measure that. So if you can't measure it, then it's going to be really hard to define if you were successful or not. So you kind of got to go through on this plan and really answer all of those questions. First, what are the objectives? Second, what are the steps to success? And then third, how am I going to measure it? And then that's where really working with a manager or a leader really comes into play, because what I know I've done in the past is I'll pick an objective, I'll put together a execution plan, and then go, well, I don't really know how I'm going to measure this. So then I have to kind of go back and adjust things, or I put together a execution plan and I work with somebody else and I say, look at my 1-year plan, and they say, that's, these steps aren't going to lead to success on that. And so it's really working with your manager or your leader to really make sure that what you've outlined is going to lead to success.
Yeah, and I think, it's one of the key points to notate too is your first go round on these. You can't have the expectation that you're going to have this perfect, especially for one, if it's your first time implementing something like this, right? There's going to be that period where you're going to figure out how to get more reasonable objectives that can be achieved, right? So there's that element. And then also too, I think anytime that there's a new hire, we mentioned last week, this is one of the steps of our 90-day probationary period, is getting a business plan in place. But I can assure you that business plan in that first year is going to change several times throughout the year as you meet with that person, because there's a bit of a feeling out period, right? That you're not quite sure exactly where all their weaknesses are. You're essentially relying on them to kind of communicate properly to you where they could use some assistance in. So you're kind of at first taking that, taking their word for it and building it around that. But then as time goes on, as you get more comfortable working with that person, you get to understand them better. You see their the work they're putting out there. You're going to realize quickly that the business plan needs to change a bit, and you're going to cater it much more specific for that person. I find that going into the second year, you're able to put out a very good plan right off the bat and really grow that employee a lot from years 1 to 2, a lot more than you can even in that first year. So, I think the key is just take your best effort at it. Don't beat yourself up. Try to have the perfect business plan, especially for a new hire, and your first time implementing. It's not going to be there yet. So, but yeah, to that being said, if we're dropping down, the next area that we like to look at is going to be personal growth and training objectives. So from a technical standpoint, this is probably one of the easier areas to fill. From technicians, they're usually going to tell you what they want to learn, what they're interested in. So this is probably the easiest box for the employee to help you populate, because if somebody who really does and is passionate about their job, that's always what they want. They want the ability to grow. So they're going to tell you what opportunities they want you to help them achieve. And I think that box tends to be the easiest. If anything, this is the box where really you got to scale it back. This is the box more than any that, they're picking goals that are not attainable, right? It's not realistic to think a technician's going to get, 2 or 3 Microsoft certs, get a VMware certification, pass the SonicWall firewall exam, right? And keep up with what you expect them to do day to day. So, I from my experience, it might be different for you, Chuck, with employees you manage, but this is the one where typically they're coming in with, 7 or 8 bullet points of things. And I got to help them kind of refocus of, hey, let's focus on these 2 or 3. If you get these accomplished, that's fantastic. We can always add more to it. But the key is you want these employees to make commitments that they can achieve. You don't want to get to the end of the year, review this plan, and it's a bunch of bullet points that never got touched.
Right. The other, I think, value to this particular box is that personal growth part is what you're going to hopefully see is kind of where they ultimately want to start going. You might have a tech that really wants to move more in towards like a project role, or maybe they really like customer service and they want to move more into like an account management role. So they might come in and say, my personal growth, I want to take Brian's job and be the VP of technology. Or they might say, what, I like what I do, but I'd really like to focus more on account management. I like the interaction with people. And you can kind of start to see that. And you might say, okay, well, that's not going to happen in a year, but we can start building out a plan to help you ultimately get there, right? You might say, okay, yeah, you want to go towards account management. Okay, we still need you in service desk right now, but if that's really where you want to go, let's start building out a plan. Let's start focusing some of your training on account management type stuff and client satisfaction type stuff, and still keep focusing on the technical piece too, because that's your current role. But I think that's one of the value to this particular box is really it helps you to kind of get an idea of what their outlook is and where they ultimately want to go. And ultimately, if there's a way to help them get there, that's really a best case scenario, because you want everybody in a role that they want to be in. So, but if they come in and they say, well, I want to be the president of the company, and that's just never going to happen, then it gives you the opportunity to say, look, that's never going to happen. So if that's really what you're looking for, you're probably not going to get that here type of thing. So I think it helps to kind of set that stage for where they want to go. Is it realistic? Can they get there? Do they have the skills necessary to start working towards that? Do they have the time to start working towards that? All of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's an opportunity to get expectations aligned early on. I think a lot of time, employees, especially newer hires, right? They come in and they get settled in, they get comfortable, and their eyes are set well on the horizon, and they're not focused on what's kind of in front of them right now. So it's a good way to kind of just level expectations.
Yeah, for sure. And so the next area that we've got is on ours is customer relationship objectives, and you might tweak that a little bit if you're talking more towards like an internal IT department, and it might just be, instead of saying customer relationship, you might say staff relationship objectives, something like that. But it really the theme would be the same, and it's really just what can you do within your role to help the overall, whether it's customer satisfaction, staff satisfaction with the IT department, whatever it is, because in effect, if you're working internal in an IT department, your customers are all of the end users, right, that you're supporting. So you can kind of look at it from the same point, this has always been one of my favorite boxes because it's always been a passion of mine, is customer relationships and customer satisfaction. And so I really kind of have always liked getting into this particular box, and spending some time here is how can we continue to improve our client relations.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. For anybody listening who you are kind of maybe thinking about taking this kind of approach towards your internal IT, I would highly recommend, if you don't already, to have some type of customer satisfaction element added to your ticketing system. However, your employees submit tickets, it is good to have that feedback element to it. And to that point, to this particular box, if you do have that type of system in place, that's just an easy goal that really should probably be on every technician's business plan, is their CSAT scores, right? Provide a good customer experience. In a lot of ways, your IT department can be kind of a face of a company. They're most of the time they're either interfacing with your end users, or they might be supporting your clients that you go to. If you're in software development or something like that, where you're providing support to a product you're selling, I think it's a very good way to kind of shift that focus, because I think with technicians, there tends to be that element of they just get stuck into grinding tickets all day, and it's easy to kind of lose that element of providing a good service experience, right? So I think that should almost be just a given on anybody's 1-year plan. Probably until you get to the point where you don't have to worry about that person anymore, that they've bought into the culture, they're living by it. And I think that's kind of the goal of what a lot of these fields, a lot of these things you're going to pick are, is to really get them to buy into the culture and live by it.
Yeah, and I think I've even heard of instances where people have left companies because they just are tired of dealing with having technology that's not working or something like that. So really, that's where that staff satisfaction can come into play. If you have that internal team, is if you're not providing good support for the staff, eventually they're going to get tired of it, and either they're going to make a change, or you might start to lose some of your staff because they need to. People want, when they come into work, they want to be able to work, right? So when their computer's not working, when the system's down, whatever it is, and they can't work, they're frustrated, and nobody likes to be frustrated regularly. So ultimately that can lead to that. And I think you mentioned the CSAT scores, and one of the big things too is you have to, especially when you first implement that, you really have to make an initiative to get those filled out. So just adding them into your ticketing system and having them go out with every closed ticket, whatever, is not enough. You also have to have, and that's another thing that could go into this for techs, is give them a measurable and give them an objective to start getting those survey results coming in. So when they're closing tickets, actually talking to the end user and saying, hey, you're going to get a survey at the end of this. Hopefully I did a really good job for you. If you could fill that out, we really appreciate the feedback. Stuff like that, where you can start letting people know, hey, you're going to get this survey. It helps me. It affects me if you fill it out or not, will also be a good piece of this, especially if you're just implementing that. Because if you're only getting, say, 5% of the CSAT results, it's still helpful, but not as much as if you're never going to get 100%. A lot of people just aren't going to take the time. But if you're getting maybe 50% or something like that, it's a lot more helpful the more that you get.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that one more point, I think what's good about picking that objective in terms of providing good customer service is approaching that second column, then the steps to success. How are they going to achieve that, right? Because customer service, what you'll find is it means a lot. It means it's different to whoever you ask, right? They kind of, what their thought is how to deliver a good customer service experience really varies, and it might vary from what your expectation is. So I always like to start with seeing what they think. Okay, what are the steps you need to do to provide a good customer service experience, right? Get their mind thinking of all the things they can do. It's, answer the phone call with a particular greeting, right? Call end users to give them an update instead of just sending emails. When you do close out a ticket and you're sending a closure email, right? Write it as if you're communicating to that person. genuinely explain, high level what you did, let them know you took care of it. If there's anything else, to let you know, right? And drive that personal experience, because you'll notice that the relationship between end users and technicians will improve over time too. But I think the key is I always let the technicians give a stab at what they're thinking first, and then I kind of just help smooth over as needed the bullet point.
Yeah, and I think, implementing a tool versus just, asking for feedback. If you implement a tool, that's where that now accountability comes in, because now you can measure it. You can see individual by tech and overall what the satisfaction results are. So you can start to see, who's providing a really good experience for your staff or for your clients, and, who's giving a mediocre service for your staff or clients. So really more so than just saying, hey, can you give me feedback on it? You want to have a tool, make it super easy, just like a happy or not type thing, and give them the option to write more if they want as far as feedback is concerned.
Yep.
And then have it all drop into a tool where you can easily have a dashboard or run a report to get that information out of it, I think is key as well. So as we move on here, we've got the next box we've got is process improvements. And this has always been one of my least favorite, because I'm not a documentation person, but it's very important. It's everything that we do ultimately is driven by a process. So, really just kind of how can we within our role affect the processes? What do we need to be conscious of? What do we need to be looking for? How do we keep those processes alive? That's kind of all the stuff that really kind of goes into that. I don't know what you see from the tech side of things. I just know myself, I've always kind of had a this has probably always been my lowest score on this sheet, because I just am not a real, me, I'm not real big into documentation. So
Nope. Yeah, I mean, to that point, I've expanded that box a bit for my team. I've made it company culture / fellow employees / process improvement, because there's a lot of roles that are not in a position to directly impact processes. So it's kind of, you find that there's a lot of crickets when you get to this box trying to figure out how they can contribute, right? Other than living by the processes that are in place. And then so I've expanded a bit to be, more of, take the technical side of the business out, take the support element out, within the walls of the building, what are things you can do that you can contribute to that will help improve things. So I think, some of the things I've done is with higher level techs, right? If you got a higher level guy, that's kind of like the go-to guy of the team, whenever issues come up, that's the man they run over to, the man, woman that they want to see, hey, how do I do this? I know you know how to fix this, right? I think this is an opportunity to kind of shift some of that knowledge to the rest of the team. For that guy, I would have them set up some kind of maybe a monthly training with the team, right? They can pick a category that they know that they commonly get questions for assistance, and just have them put together a little 5-10 minute, presentation training at either, one of your department meetings, or what we'll do typically is do like a lunch and learn and cater in food, and have that person give a presentation to teach a topic that the rest of the team could benefit from. So it gives them an opportunity to contribute back, help elevate the team around them, and everybody else benefits by soaking up some new knowledge. So I think that's a good one for if you have like I said, like a lead tech. I think for us, we do a lot of different charitable things throughout the year. I think this is a box where somebody who really resonates with that, it's an opportunity for them to make a commitment to leading one of those initiatives. That's something typically we'll open up for volunteers. So that's a good positive thing to get them to invest into the business outside of the day-to-day. And I think that's kind of the route that I typically go with it with the technical staff, is just focusing on, within the building from the business side of it, take out the day-to-day grind of technical stuff. What can we do? What can you bring to the table to help somebody else around you?
Yeah, and as you bring out an interesting thing, company culture. That's something that I think a lot of techs probably don't feel like they can have really much of an impact on. But really they can have a huge impact on it. Really, everybody in the organization should have an impact on the company culture, because everybody in the organization lives by that company culture, whatever it is, right? So if they want to see it change, if they want to see it improve, if they want to see it stay the same, whatever it is, this is kind of where they can weigh in on that and say, I think our company culture needs this or that, and here's what I think I can do to help with that. And so a lot of this too, it's not just, it kind of gives them an avenue, right? They're not just complaining about something and not doing anything to help fix it, but it gives them a chance to say, here's where I see something in the company that could be fixed, and here's how I think I can help fix it, right? So it kind of helps, I think, them think of things more from that business perspective, and kind of elevate themselves a bit out of that just day-to-day tech perspective, but think of things more from that leadership level, because that's really what we ask of everybody, is to kind of act like a leader. Think of it like you're an owner of the company, and what would you want to change if you were running this company? And I'd say 9 times out of 10, the recommendations that we get, we take, because they're the ones that are living it day in, day out, and we want everybody to work in a spot that makes them happy and that they can be successful in. So I think this is that company culture part that you mentioned is really important. Well, last box we have kind of goes along with the personal growth part, but it's the business and career objectives. So this is really where you can get into, more long term, where do you want to go, right? So in your personal growth, you're probably looking more in the short term. What can I do throughout this year? In the business and career, you can now start to focus more long term. Where do I want to go? And then write steps for this year. So that's really where you along with that personal growth one, where you'll really start to see kind of what they're thinking long term. And you might be concerned if you've got somebody, let's say you hired them in and they're a level 1 tech, and they say, long term I want to be a level 1 tech still. You might say, okay, well, why don't you want to continue to grow in your career? And you can kind of talk through that. Or they might say, well, I don't want to be a tech at all, I want to be in finance. And you might go, okay, well, then you're in the wrong role now. So, it really kind of helps to figure out and kind of match up their business and career objectives with what we see on the horizon within the company.
Yeah, I think this is probably my favorite box. The approach I've kind of gone with this is I kind of break it up into 2 parts in this box. I do actually a short term and a long term element to it. So short term, basically, the way I try to break it out is your short term is your 1 to 2 year outlook. So really, that should be high level bullet points that are aligned with all the previous boxes we just talked about, right? Because essentially this is a 1 year plan. So this should be all encompassing of what that 1 year plan was. If you were to give yourself a 2 or 3 sentence summary on what you just did with all this detailed planning, what is that 2 to 3 sentence summary tell me that this plan is all about? So that's kind of how I break out the short term element. And just to give an example of some points that would be on there, more often than not, it's going to be, closing the technical skill gap in this area, right? Cloud computing, security, something like that. Achieve a, expert level Microsoft certification, right? Something that it would take, 5 or 6 different certifications to pass, right? That's not realistic in 1 year necessarily. It may be able to, but it certainly is a realistic goal for a 2 year plan. And then it may be to position themselves into another role, right? They might say they want to start looking at a lead role in the short term, right? They might see an opportunity in the horizon where in 1 to 2 years they might think that might be something that's in play. So that's where I think that's how I approach the short term. And then the long term is your 5 year plan. That's ultimately, where do you want to end up in your career, right? And I think that's the box that really gets the brain churning. And what I find is, once you get to the point where they're speaking honestly on what their long-term goal is, it makes it a lot easier then to go back a second time and address everything else. Because if you go through it the first time and you're picking this training and stuff for, that's kind of like leadership training. They want to be a manager or whatever. That's maybe that's how the dialogue starts. But when you get to the long term and they openly tell you, hey, my degree's in security, and I would love to be a security administrator for a company one day. Well, then you're going to backtrack like, what, let's not worry about the management training, right? That's where your passion is. That's what you want to be. So if you value that employee, I think our goal is to always keep employee turnover minimum. We want to find a way to keep the good people and put them in a situation to succeed that benefits the business, right? So I think if when you approach it that way, you want to start having this business plan reflect pieces of that long-term plan if it does fit your business needs, because what that's going to do is show them right away that you are committed to them for the long term, that you do have goals to help them develop into a role that they do want one day. So I think that's an opportunity for you guys to get on the same page right away, rather than telling somebody, yep, oh yeah, that makes sense, I'd love to put you in that role one day. You can actually now make that the kind of the focus of this business plan. And, you still put them in different elements of the business, but you always make sure that you're at least advancing them one step closer to that 5-year objective, every plan that you put out. And that's the way I break it up. And I think it works out great. But again, This is a really hard one to do when you first hire somebody. This is the hardest box.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think, the keys with this whole thing is knowing that it's going to potentially change, for sure in the first year, but even after that, from year to year. Like when I look at mine, like some of the stuff I've got around training and such involves going to conferences. Well, a lot of those conferences just got canceled. So if I had attend such and such conference and that conference is canceled, obviously I'm not going to be able to go to that. And so I just go back and I cross that one off, right? So it's going to change throughout the year potentially, but that's where it involves working with your staff at the beginning of every year, or more towards the end of a year, to write it for this next year, to come up with the plan, and then regularly keeping in contact about that plan. So I know we talk about it at least every quarter, and a lot of times even more often than that, but really just keeping up to date on it. Is everything that's on here still realistic? How is your progress coming? Is there anything you need help with? Different things like that, to just let them know that as an organization, you're there to support them as well, to help them to be able to reach these goals. And if they're having trouble with something, they should feel comfortable to be able to go to their manager and say, hey, I know we put this down in my 1-year plan, but I'm really struggling with it because whatever. And as a manager, you got to be able to talk through that, make changes as necessary, or help them get back on track.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Have regular touch points. I shoot for, to look over this monthly with each employee is the goal, and I track it separately, so that way, I'm making sure that I'm keeping it moving. But I think, if you meet on this monthly, even bi-monthly, the route we typically go is we'll look through it and we'll pull off action items, like we're saying, and that way, then the next time you meet, you go back and see what progress they made on those action items. And I think that's just this is kind of your tool to keep driving the development of those people. And then I think the other benefit to the employee is, if they put together a really good business plan and they execute it throughout the year, it's going to help their case when it comes time for year-end review. So in terms of selling the business plan and the value of it, if the career growth isn't enough, then, you can reflect it to utilizing it in terms of your employee performance reviews, and say, this is one of the main tools that we're going to look at, the success or failure of it. And the employees that means a lot to, they're going to dig in right away, and that's where I think that the benefit comes in both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's we went through our typical 1-year plan. Hopefully you'll find some benefit to that between this week and last week, around really helping your IT team, whether you're a service provider, whether you've got an internal IT team, really to help them to be able to continue to grow and set up career paths, set up these 1-year plans. And we appreciate you listening, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.
Interact with Tech Talk Detroit at techtalkdetroit.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.